guys, and welcome to part 2 of our must-read counselling books for all counsellors and counselling trainees. And like I did in the last session, this is going to be divided into themes, and the themes within this section are professional growth and ethics, innovative approaches and diverse perspectives, and finally additional must-reads. Now, our first section is professional growth and ethics, and the first book in this section is Counselling Skills in Action by Megan Rose Stafford and Tim Bond. Now, this is a particularly useful book for counselling trainees going into their placement, as this aims to apply theoretical knowledge to practical settings. And it offers step-by-step guide on various counselling techniques, facilitating the development of reflective practice and the incorporation of ethical practices in day-to-day interactions. And next we have anti-discriminatory practice in counselling and psychotherapy. Now, for students, this is a really essential guide for understanding how unconscious bias can affect counselling practices, as well as systematic discrimination. It provides strategies and frameworks to actively combat these occurring in the counselling dynamic, and really it's an essential skill in counselling practice that I would highly recommend honing in on. Next, we have Boundaries and Boundary Violations in Psychoanalysis. And this book looks at one of the most critical aspects of the client-counsellor relationship, and that is boundaries. And this is often a very complex landscape in order for counsellors to navigate. Now, it discusses boundary violations and strategies for avoiding these. The text also uses case studies to illustrate potential ethical pitfalls, helping you to really foresee and manage these challenges proactively. Next up, we have Innovative Approaches and Diverse Perspectives. And the first book in this section is Couch Fiction, a graphic tale of psychotherapy. And like the title suggests, this is an illustrative graphic book. And it's really an innovative educational tool, really demystifying the often opaque process of psychotherapy through visuals and storytelling. Counselling students should find this particularly accessible, offering a really unique way of understanding client-counsellor relationships and psychoanalytical concepts without the dense jargon that often accompanies these. Next, in a similar vein, we have Counselling for Toads, a Psychological Adventure. Now, this is a really narrative-driven approach that offers a really great introduction to key psychological concepts through the familiar format of a story. And it's a really gentle introduction to the therapeutic process and the transformative power of therapy. Now, finally, in this section, we have Psychology Beyond Western Perspectives. And this text really challenges counsellors and counselling students to think outside of the Western perspective and the Western framework of psychology and psychological concepts, and consider other cultural factors that might affect mental health and mental health practices and the way that we view mental health. And it's a really essential text for developing culturally competent understanding of therapy and a really holistic understanding of therapy. And our final book in this section is Overcoming Everyday Racism, Building Resilience and Wellbeing by Susan Cousins. And this is essential for supporting clients who've been affected by racial trauma and discrimination. And it provides tools and strategies not only for counsellors to provide support, but also for personal resilience and for fostering understanding of how systematic racism can affect mental health. And our final section is additional must-reads. Now, in this section, we have In Therapy, The Unfolding Story. Now, this book provides a behind-the-scenes look at therapeutic practice, offering a real-world look into counselling thought practices and client interactions. Now, it's particularly beneficial in looking at the subtleties of counsellor-client relationship. Next, we have Developing Person-Centred Counselling, and this is a great book for deepening an understanding of the person-centred approach, advocating for the effectiveness of genuine therapeutic change. And it's essential for students who are using the person-centred approach to build client relationships on genuine empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. Next, we have Cognitive Therapy and Emotional Disorders, and this is a deep dive into cognitive therapy, looking at cognitive techniques to treat emotional disorders. And it provides a really clear framework of understanding and addressing emotional disorders using cognitive therapy, particularly with those struggling with anxiety, depression, and other emotional issues. Next, we have this person-centered approach, A Passionate Presence. Now, much like the previous book, this is a great look at the person-centered approach pioneered by Carl Rogers. And this book explores its philosophical roots and practical application in therapy. And it's a really passionate endorsement of the person-centered approach. So if this is the approach that you're training with, it's a great book to read. And finally, we have Counselling Skills and Studies. Now, this is an absolutely excellent resource for counselling trainees, covering all the basics of counselling skills and theories. And it's designed to support students in their initial stages of training, providing really clear examples and exercises to develop effective counselling techniques and self-awareness. So that brings us to the end of our top 30 must-read books for every counsellor and counsellor trainee. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if we've missed any out, feel free to comment them in our comment section.